entertained this weekend, and certainly the Terps headed off to State College, the undefeated Terps. Let me point that out. But it is the loss of the Orioles and the way and the manner and the controversy and the offense or lack thereof and the Ubaldo Jimenez and Zach Britton and Buck Showalter Bermuda Triangle. We'll call it the Baltimore Triangle. We're going to be talking about this for months. This guy and I have been talking baseball for over 2 decades now here at WNST and on the radio. He was my ballpark reporter. He is an Oriole historian, and much like me, a very available individual who's been banned by the Orioles in their press box. Alan, as I was not driving across eastern Ontario in the middle of the night to cross the border and make a 7 a.m. flight, I was kind of happy they didn't give me a press pass in Toronto on Tuesday. In the end, they did me a favor, but I tell you what, Buck Showalter's done himself no favors for this offseason for the first time. Second guessing is coming. This has become a real baseball town again with criticism and tomatoes for the manager and fire the manager and all that stuff. I've never seen anything like in the history of Oriole baseball. I can't imagine a managerial decision that won't just be scrutinized. There will never be anyone that could even take Buck's side in this one, I think.
You're talking about not bringing Zach Britton in the game?
Yes, ending the season with your best pitcher on the bench, yes.
Right. I will tell you how I feel about it, but first I'm going to say it's irrelevant, ultimately, who's going to bring in the game. For 11 innings, they had 4 hits and a walk against a starting pitcher who is good, but not great.
Well, that's 11 innings. That means 33 outs, right? How many of them were good at bats?
5?
8? Yeah, 8. I was going to say 8, and I'm not being generous. I mean, and how many were really bad at bats? 20, 25 were really bad at bats. Yeah.
I walk into the location where I was going to watch the game, and I see the fly ball that Adam Jones hit, and it's caught, okay? And the guy standing in front of me just looks dejected, and I walked right up to him and I said, "First pitch, right?" Swung at the first pitch.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, "Yeah," and he just sort of shook his head, and we both said, "Adam." I mean, and to me, that tells the story of the game. That so many of the guys, Jonathan Scope, Manny Machado, Adam Jones, swinging at the first pitch, or no plan, rolling over the ball to hit a ground ball. Or popping it up because they're up there trying to pull everything, trying to knock the ball out of the ballpark. And, they'll deny that, and that's fine. But I've watched at-bats for a long time. No, I didn't play Major League Baseball. No, I'm not a coach in the major leagues. But I recognize what happens when you try to do something with a ball that you probably shouldn't do. The first hit they got was Adam Jones taking a couple pitches and finally hitting the ball the other way. Amazing what happens when you take a pitch. So ultimately, they could have gone 18 innings. Zach Britton could have come in and pitched 6 shutout innings. But as long as they were going to continue to have bats like that and get themselves out, what difference does it make? They had one swing that produced 2 runs. It's about this team they are what they are. They're a first ball, fastball, mistake hitting team. And this is what I said to you.
And those teams don't win 103 games unless they have Koufax and Kuzman and Seaver pitching, right?
It's good. It can be good enough for regular. When you assemble the kind of power laden team they had, it's good for you can get through the regular season because you are going to face number 4 pitchers, number 5 pitchers in the middle of or back end of bullpens, and you can win. And there's less focus in the regular season. Tomorrow, the next day, unless it's the last day of the season, isn't the last day. So I mean, you can get through that. But in the postseason, when everything matters, and when you can be easily figured out, you're not going to do it. The Orioles' offense is a one-trick pony. It's a cool trick. But if everybody
Chicks
knows
dig the long ball, right? I mean, we know that, right?
If everybody knows the trick, it's not a surprise. So, I mean, there's nothing about the way most of the guys on this team take their at-bats that's hard to figure out.
I don't know why anybody would ever throw him a strike. And obviously, part of the game plan with the Blue Jays was don't throw him a strike. I mean, 3 or 4 of these guys, Scope, Jones, you never have to throw those guys a strike. I mean, Chris Davis is a little more judicious. I mean, he'll take a walk now and again.
And Wieters, and the thing is, it's ironic because as much as I've talked about needing to have a more dynamic section of the team, if you're going to put that lineup out there, you got to kind of have Pedro Alvarez out there, because what you're saying is, I'm going to go for broke. And Alvarez, who I personally think, I mean, just you look at the kind of things that happened over the course of the season. I mean, Buck left Chris Davis in the cleanup or number 5 spot in the lineup for, 100, 110 games during the course of the season, hitting 220, 240 through a lot of the year. And yes, he would take walks, but I mean, that batting average is so low. And Pedro Alvarez, for example, I mean, it obviously not the first 2 or 3 months, but once he got going, he was pretty consistent in terms of getting hits, producing runs, taking walks. I mean, if you're going to put that lineup out in the postseason, and I know he didn't have a ton of choice because that's sort of what the lineup is, I kind of feel like you have to have Pedro Alvarez out there, because you're saying everybody's trying to hit a home run. Let's at least have a guy out there who will take a walk and try and create runs, as well as possibly striking out or hitting the ball out of the ballpark. But when it's all said and done, I mean, they got themselves out. I mean, you want to give credit to the Toronto Blue Jays, fine. I mean, obviously they won the game, they shut them down, but they shut them down because the Orioles are an easy team to figure out how to get them out. It happened with Kansas City. It happened with New York in 2012. At least in those years, you had a Nick Markakis, you had a Nelson Cruz, who were actually good hitters as well. I mean, they have basically doubled and tripled down on the kind of hitters that Adam Jones and Chris Davis are. Yes, Mark Trumbo had a tremendous season, and for what he is, he had his best season yet. But he throw him into the mix. I mean, he's a guy that can be easily gotten out, and when you're on a pressure stage like that, you have to be patient. You have to have good at bats, and that's why the Kansas City Royals and the San Francisco Giants have consistently gone as far as they are. Because they have guys who aren't always trying to hit the ball out of the ballpark, and there's something to be said for that, particularly in the postseason.
Alan McCallum beginning our conversation and our post-mortem for the 2016 Orioles with their Tuesday night loss. And Alan, I would say I agree with everything you've said, and I would agree that if you're gonna indict Buck Showalter and the Zach Britton and the Ubaldo Jimenez, that's fine. And Buck is the one getting all of the fire on this, and he didn't throw a pitch. I mean, to some degree, Ubaldo Jimenez gets paid a lot of money to get guys out, not to give up 3-run meatballs with the game on the line in the 11th inning. And we will talk about that decision. But I'm with you. They might have played 18 innings, right? I mean, Britton might have pitched the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th,
right,
but they weren't hitting the ball. At some point, maybe the Blue Jays, Liriano, from a matchup standpoint, Liriano for 5 innings, they would have they couldn't change the lineup at that point, right? I mean, they didn't have enough bodies to bring in to make that part of it effective against him, and they would have struggled against him had he had started the game as well. But then you still have to go to the Showalter decision, because you and I, 5% of the baseball fans will look at this and say, look, they really weren't going to win anyway, so don't get your feelings hurt. Right. They were a flawed team. They weren't built to win. They weren't built.
But if you're going to go down, you go down with your best pitcher, the pitcher that.
Okay, now then that brings us to Buck,
sure,
who has been completely Teflon here, by far the best manager they've had since Davey Johnson, just because he can put up with the old man, manage it all. He runs, for being an older guy, he runs really fast when he sees me, away from me. So he falls right in line with all the other managers. But on Tuesday night, I don't know that there's anyone who's ever witnessed a game of baseball that can justify Ubaldo Jimenez as a personality, as a pitcher, as a track record, with Zach Britton, with where they were in the lineup, with where they were playing the game, with the history of the Blue Jays and the Orioles, with the bats that were in the middle of the order, with the season on the line. And having to go to you as a fan, me as a fan, Adam Jones, Manny Machado, through the clubhouse, and then go visit the old man over in the 23rd floor, over in the law offices of Peter G. Angelos, and look the old man in the eye and say, yeah, I went with the Baldo there with the season on the line, and yeah, I'm okay with that. That was a good decision. I think that's a very, very hard thing for Showalter to peddle. And as much as Billy Cundiff made a lot of kicks around here, he's only really remembered for one thing, and it's not a good thing. And with Buck Showalter, if they don't win, yeah, he won some games, and he came in, he did a better job than anybody else. And yeah, but he had Machado, he had Scope, he had Davis, he had some players. The old man spent a little bit of money. Tillman came on. He had this kid in the bullpen named Britton that he didn't use in the 11th inning in Toronto back in 16. Unless he ever wins a World Series here, this will be, this is going to hang on him like the Billy Cundiff thing hung on him. And again, he didn't throw a pitch. I mean, Ubaldo Jimenez gets paid a lot of money to get guys out, yet no one's frying Ubaldo Jimenez. Funny.
Right. So let me say this. I mean, I don't know if we said it on air, but I know off air we talked about that I thought Ubaldo probably was the right guy to start the game. And all that said, Tillman gave up 2 runs. It's hard to argue with that. And I will point out, as I've said to you for almost 2 seasons now, that the Orioles' positioning in the outfield has really hurt them, particularly in the postseason, but throughout it, because they tend to bunch their outfielders towards the gaps as opposed to the lines. And that's, you look at the second run House created. I don't think no matter where he was put, that ball was so close to the line down the left field line that he wouldn't have caught it. But the ball that Bourne just misses down the right field line, if he's playing a little closer to straight up, he's going to catch that ball. That is certainly something that I put at the feet of Buck, because they've been doing that almost without refusal to look at any other thing for a few years now. But to the pitching. I thought Ubaldo should have started the game. He didn't. Tillman was fine, and Buck got him out when he stopped being fine, and turned it over to the bullpen. And the bullpen performed admirably. Didn't give up a run, and a couple times they got into a couple tight spots, and they found a way out. Whether it was Brad Brock or Darren O'Day or Michael Givens, and they all pitched pretty admirably.
And we were all holding our nose and our breath every time he went to the bullpen, right?
Sure. I mean, no matter how
Brian
good,
Dunsing's in there with the season on the line. I mean, I would have. I said, I was with Peter and I was with my buddy Howard and my buddy Steve Luke, and I said we were at Buffalo Wild Wings. And I'm like, how do you justify if you lose this game with Brian Dunsing on the mound? And clearly Buck had no problem sending Ubaldo Jimenez out there to throw a meatball to Encarnacion, which it felt a little scripted to me almost. I mean, it was insane how treacherous the line was in the 11th inning with the season on the line.
The thing about it is that whatever you think about Ubaldo Jimenez, that he's a horrible pitcher, that he's a good guy, that he's...
No, you don't bet your season on him knowing what I've seen for 3 years.
Well, you can't bet your season on him in that situation, a situation that he has never been in, where he's coming into a game cold. He's not the starter. You look at his history. When he struggles early. But that's from the starting point.
Well, the first 2 base runners should have given you a hint, right?
Right. And you look at the situation, and you got to know that even though there was nobody on, if you look at all of his history, this is not a good situation for him. If you're going to use him, I felt like you got to use him early, or you use him as the last resort. Let's not even talk about Zach Britton. Dylan Bundy had pitched in relief and pitched pretty well in relief through the whole season. And I know he's a rookie, but hey, he threw Donnie Hart out there. And Dylan Bundy, I think, would have been much...
Yeah, if you could throw Brian Dunsing and Donnie Hart out there, why can't you throw Dylan Bundy out there?
Right. And Dylan Bundy is much more familiar with this setting. And, he should have some of the tank. They haven't pitched him in over a week. And he's in a situation where he can go balls to the wall and throw heat or do whatever he needs to do to get guys out.
Yeah, throw 35 pitches. Go out there and give me an inning or 2.
unlike a starting position, and we've seen him do that and seen him do it well. So I mean, you kind of want to set guys in situations that are familiar to them, where they make sense. So to me, before we even get to Zach Britton, because I understand the manager on the road manager mentality where I got to save my closer to the last thing. It's often stupid, particularly in a situation like this, but I understand it.
Well, that's where Bundy could be your closer, right? You know, if you use Britton in the 11th and 12th and somehow you get to the 15th and Jimenez survives or whatever, you score a run, Trumbo hits another home run or whatever. I mean, if you don't have somebody that can get you 3 outs, you don't deserve to be flying to Texas.
So, Zach Britton. What are the old adage is, you don't get beat with your second best pitch. Now, there are times when I disagree with that, but that is an old adage in baseball for a reason, okay? You can't go down in a game like that with the historically great reliever who you have when the Orioles when the media named Manny Machado the most valuable Oriole this year, I almost fell over because there is no question in my mind who the most valuable Oriole was in Zach Britton. And all you have to look at is that they finished tied in the wild card spot with 89 wins for the Blue Jays, and they didn't blow a save. If he could have been the best closer in the game and blown one save or two, and they would have finished in third place in the American League East. And arguably had the Detroit Tigers get into that spot instead of them. For the last wild card spot. So I mean, that almost by definition makes Zach Britton the most valuable Oriole. That is my opinion. You can't go down in a game like that with Zach Britton sitting on the bench. I mean, sitting in the bullpen waiting for his name to be called. I wouldn't have brought Oballo in for the reasons that I said it earlier on. If he's going into that game, it's after Dylan Bundy, it's after Zach Britton, and you've got no other bullets to throw. And if that happens, and the Orioles in 15 or 16 innings still have 5 hits and another 5 strikeouts and another number of pop-ups, and you go down with Ubaldo Jimenez, then you didn't really have any other choice.
Well, they didn't deserve to win based on the kind of at-bats they
deserved to win. They did. But to go down without having Zach Britton in the game, it's something that is incredibly hard to swallow. It's something that I don't know that Buck will ever be able to justify. And
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if he can recover, right? Because the only recovery of this is playing in the ALCS next year, maybe the next year. You know, I don't know how many more years Buck would have here, what other opportunities he may have down the line once his contract's up here. Andy McPhail ran like hell from this. You know what I mean? Once he, resurrected his reputation, he ran like hell. He's up in Philadelphia. Buck might go manage the Mets or something down. I'm just making that up, but this is certainly not an ideal situation for Buck, and this is probably the beginning of the end for him, right? I mean,
I'm not going to, I don't know about that, but Buck is not the only.
This is tough to survive, though. I mean, I would say, the only thing you can do is win the World Series where they talk about something else other than that, right?
And Buck is not only the best manager since Davey Johnson. Buck is the second best manager this team's ever had.
Yeah, Bill Buckner was a hell of a player, too, but we all know what he was famous for, right?
Nestor had 4 hits and a walk in 11 innings. I mean, to me...
No, and he also helped comprise this team that doesn't take pitches, that only hits home runs. And, to a large degree, Alvarez, Trumbo, some of these guys have been a lot better than we thought they were going to be. Really?
All right, I mean, I'll accept that. But, I mean, the bottom line is that this team was not... As good as this team was, and they won 89 games, a few moves here or there, particularly with the starting pitching, and it would have been a much better club. We all know some of the things that happened in spring training, and a couple of guys that didn't end up here, one in particular. But I mean, we talked about Chris Davis, for example, and I felt that money could have been spent much better way. The Atlanta Braves a few years ago were in contenders, and they blew that team up, not because they couldn't win games in the regular season, but because they hit a lot of home runs and they struck out too much, and they weren't a team dynamically enough to to go all the way.
Yeah, man, Buck's been around this for 50 years, right? I mean, there's no way Buck looks at this team and doesn't want for things that aren't there, right? There's no way Buck doesn't look at this team and say, I really would like to have more patient hitters. I'd really like to have a real leadoff guy. I'd really like to be able to steal a base here or again, or have somebody who can do that. I really would like a team that hit more doubles. There's a lot of things that if you were to give Buck the saliva test on this, right, and really ask him how he felt, there's no way Buck could look at this and say, well, that team was built to win, because they weren't. I mean, Buck can look at this and say, I got the most out of this thing that I could have gotten. But that's not what this is about. To 98% of the fans, especially the ones who don't pay attention, not guys like you or me, this is going to be about Zach Britton and the 11th inning and Ubaldo Jimenez. And as much as Lee Evans' career was about more than dropping a Super Bowl ball, and Billy Cundiff's career was about more than missing a kick, dude, when that's your last big act, unless they get back to the playoffs and, they win 98 games next year, the way, let's say, the Nationals, right? The Nationals aren't about Papelbon and Bryce Harper choking right now, right? They're about trying to win a World Series. The next act it's hard to follow up on that, because spring training is going to be about Zach Britton and Ubaldo Jimenez in that decision. Every time opening day will be about that, because they're playing the Blue Jays on opening day. So this isn't going to go away. The only thing that deodorizes this is a parade, quite frankly.
Well, if that's the case, it's a shame.
But it's true. I've been doing this a long time.
This is, if we're going to be the Chicago Cubs and blame a kid sitting in the stands because of foul ball, that was a foul ball, didn't get caught, fine. If everybody's gonna shake their heads and hold their nose about a situation in the 11th inning, where Buck just clearly made a mistake.
I don't represent society. I just hold up a mirror. You know what I mean? Literally.
I understand. That's
all I do here.
The bottom line is, and I'm pretty sure I said this to you before the season started when we were talking about predictions, is that this team is fundamentally flawed offensively. That you can get by with this kind of offense if they're all, in fact, slugging, and they did through the course of the season. I think I said they can beat they're going to beat the number 4, number 5 starters. They're going to beat the number 3 starters half the time, and then the question is, what do they do against number 1 and number 2 starters? And they did fine. I mean, enough to get them into the postseason. But the way the wild card is structured, you got one shot, and if you got one shot, you can't play like that. And they were going to go through the whole postseason looking like that. I mean, someone might get hot, someone might help carry them for a few games. I mean, that's certainly possible. But if that's the way you're going to carry your at bats, and we've certainly seen Adam Jones do that through the postseason. And Chris Davis and Matt Wieters didn't really have a shot in 2014. But I will say this: I think Manny Machado would be a different hitter if Nick Markakis were here. We're still here.
Maybe if Nelson Cruz were here as well.
If Nelson, yeah, I mean, I think that when you're around the guy, and it's easy. I'm not trying to pass it off on Adam Jones. Adam Jones is a fine player, but I've said this to you for a long time. He's not the guy I'd want my young guys to learn from in terms of how to approach the game offensively. That in this club, I mean, you're the leadoff hitter in a winner-take-all game, and part of the leadoff hitter's job is to gauge the starting pitcher and help the lineup see some pitches, and he swings the first pitch and pops.
Well, Adam Jones is not getting better as a baseball player. He's the same player he was when he was 24. He's a real nice player. He's really good at what he's good at, but he is not a guy who has worked every day to get better and to really improve the holes in his game. The holes in his game are the holes in his game, and he's okay with that, and he's got $90 million, and he's a pretty cocky cat to begin with, and he goes out and plays the game the way he plays the game.
And let me be clear about this. He's a good dude. I think he's a good leader. His swagger on the team allows for a lot of guys to be who they are, and for the team to still sort of carry a respect.
Well, they missed the pies this year. I'm not, I was never a fan of that, but, in writing about why fans don't go and why they do go, I said Angelos got the F out, which is the fun. I mean,
right.
The part of the fun, this team wasn't nearly as much fun as teams in the past. They didn't have rallies. They hit home runs or they struck
Right.
out. That's what they did.
Right.
I mean, it
That's
wasn't
what
a
they
lot
did.
of fun. The fun lasted, the 14 seconds it takes to circle the bases, but and there were a lot of nights where you sat on your hands and watched them strike out 14 times.
But I mean, you're right. I mean, he basically says, "Hey, I am who I am. I'm going to be that." And the test of a truly great player is someone who's always striving to be better. That's not to say he doesn't work hard at his craft. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you know that you are susceptible constantly to the outside slider, maybe you need to work on not swinging at the outside slider. But I mean, he goes up there like that a lot, and you watch the Hyun-Soo Kim at bat in Toronto a week ago when he hits the home run to win the game is noteworthy because it name me any other player on that team that was capable of having that at bat, seeing 10 pitches, fouling pitches off, spoiling good pitches until the pitcher got tired, mentally, physically, whatever, what have you, and makes a mistake that he can hit out of the ballpark. The Orioles don't have those kinds of at-bats. Even when they're going well, for 6 weeks at the beginning of the season, they approached their at-bats in a patient way, and we took note of it, that, wow, if they can sustain this, and it's hard to believe they could, but if they can sustain this for the course of the season, then you're really talking about something offensively with this club. But after those 6 weeks, that disappeared, and they returned to the team that has the kind of at-bats that we've seen. And I know that part of that is mental and physical exhaustion. And Buck played these guys. I mean, Jonathan Scope never had a day off. Manny didn't. The only time these guys got days off were when they were suspended or when they were hurt. And that takes a toll. It's hard to focus. It's hard to be patient when you have that kind of exhaustion and you resort to what you are. And going into the postseason, that's just not going to win. It just doesn't. So, I mean, if people that are looking from the outside and say, "Oh, well, this is all this one move cost them the postseason," no, it didn't. I mean, they were in first place for over 100 games, and had they stayed in first place, I mean, they can talk all they want about we're happy to be where we are. Being in first place means you don't have to play a playing game. It means you have more than one shot. And that didn't happen. So if you do, you got to be awfully darn focused for that game and play your best. And that didn't happen.
Well, if Bourne catches the ball, they're going to Texas, right?
I don't know. I mean, there were 3 straight hits, right? So I mean, he would still been on second base. It sure as heck would have been a more palatable situation. I'll put it that way. It's very likely they could have won. I wouldn't say 100%, but they certainly would have been.
Well, that was a major play, though. If we're going to talk about, I mean, every play is a major play. Every at bat was a major at bat,
right.
And they had a lot of really bad major at bats in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th inning. So, Alan McCallum, joining. Go ahead, Alan. Wrap it up for us.
Yeah, so I return to the other point that if all the things that I think you throw at Buck's feet. I mean, positioning of the outfielders, I firmly believe has been an issue here for multiple years, and nobody pays attention to it. It's barely ever talked about, but it has cost the Orioles over and over and over. Yes, there's some balls hitting the gaps that they've caught. I'm fine, but you watch the games in the Kansas City Royals postseason ALCS of 2014, and you will see over and over and over again balls that drop down the lines that either should have been caught or should have been singles that turned into doubles that the Orioles outfield positioning really cost them. And that is completely on Buck, in my opinion. So, I mean, if you're going to lay something at Buck's feet, I mean, I think that's it. It was a poor decision, but it certainly wasn't. It was in the 11th inning, Ness. It wasn't in the 7th. It wasn't in the 8th. It wasn't in the 9th. And it's hard to believe that the way they were going, that they were going to. Could a pitcher in the 13th made a mistake and they popped one out? Sure, I guess. But it ultimately wouldn't have mattered because they weren't going to go far in the postseason the way they were approaching the offense.
Save me a trip to Dallas is what you're telling me, right, Al?
I guess.
Alan McCallum can be reached, Alan at WNST.net. We will have plenty to pour through here in the offseason with comings and goings and the Trumbos and the Weeders and other decisions that are going to be made. You can reach me, Nasty, at WNST.net. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Next Tuesday night, CJ Mosley will be joining us at Buffalo Wild Wings in Owings Mills. We'll also be there on Monday night for our best seat in the house and our wing eating challenge. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.